The early colonial Spanish Caribbean, from the arrival of Columbus in 1492 until 1562, is a space in which many cultures forcefully came together. The island of Hispaniola, today Haiti and the Dominican Republic, was the first island which saw large-scale intercultural interactions as a result of Spanish colonial actions. Besides interactions between the indigenous inhabitants and the Spanish colonists, people were also brought in from Africa and from surrounding Caribbean islands and the South American mainland in order to work as enslaved peoples in the colonies. This resulted in a very diverse, multicultural colonial society. Material culture from early colonial sites can offer us some great insights into the intercultural encounters between the peoples of the Old and the New World. Up until recently, the material culture of the colonies has been studied from a historical bias, in which the indigenous peoples of the Caribbean disappeared within a couple of years after the conquest and with no room for subaltern agency. This was also the case for ceramics with traces of the potter's wheel found on various sites on Hispaniola. Traditionally, these have been labeled as European imports, but here I would like to challenge that assumption, as the intercultural encounters within colonies in the New World have led to the creation of new social identities and changing material culture repertoires. Macro-trace ceramic analysis from the sites of Concepción de la Vega and Cotuí, both in Hispaniola, show that the potter's wheel was in fact introduced to the Spanish colony at an early stage. To give some context to the material, I will first offer you some site background. Concepción de la Vega, consisting of a military fort, a monastery and a residential part of the town, dates between 1494 and 1562. La Vega was the largest Spanish settlement on the island during the early colonial period and housed both elite and non-elite European colonists as well as Amerindian and African inhabitants. Its economy was mainly based on gold mining, with gold mines surrounding the city. Later, a shift towards sugar production and cattle herding occurred. This paper focuses on the ceramic material from the fort, as well as one of the contemporaneous surrounding gold mines, Cotuí. Cotuí is one of the first colonial mining camps that exploited by the Europeans in the New World and dates between 1505 and 1562. The site comprised of a church and a mining camp. Additionally, 8 postals were found which possibly represent a perishable booth or a place to prepare food or processing the mined materials. One of the most distinctive characteristics of Spanish colonial site assemblages in the Caribbean is the overwhelming dominance of ceramic artifacts. Research towards these ceramics have often noted a predominance of European imported pottery, which can be related to the wish to recreate Iberian life in the colonies. Identification is often done by visual analysis of the paste, the color, surface treatment, and decorative motif. At the same time, some pioneering studies have shown changes and disappearances of Amerindian pottery traditions after the Spanish colonization. Though these studies have been important in starting to understand the intercultural dynamics in Spanish colonies, they have remained somewhat intuitive and not systematic. The same was done with the type of ceramic I present here. In excavation reports, these were classified as European imports, similar to the orange micaceous ware as classified by Kathleen Deegan in her book Artifacts of the Spanish Colonies of Florida and the Caribbean, 1500 till 1800. The orange micaceous wares resemble the Merida wares from southwestern Spain and are theorized to have been a mass-produced export ware. However, when conducting my research, I noticed that some of the sherds with traces of the potter's wheel closely resemble paste from more locally produced indigenous wares by the naked eye. They were indeed less coarsely tempered than the indigenous sherds, but they resembled them enough to take a closer look. Eventually, petrographic analysis of the 2 varieties of clays of this type, conducted by the University of Leuven, suggests local provenance of these clays. This, together with the find of a partial potter's wheel at La Vega, suggests the introduction of wheel-made ceramics at the island in early colonial times. Generally seen, most of the clays selected from the manufacture of these ceramics were of a very fine to fine clay, of red to reddish brown or grayish brown paste. Here you see some of the macrotraces that show evidence of wheel-made ceramics. One of the most important and predominant traces is the presence of rilling on the surface of the vessel's wall. They show rhythmic ridges and grooves that spiral around the vessel's wall. They are present on both the inside and the outside of the sherds. Concentric striations on the bottom of the base are also amongst the characteristics. They are caused by the cutting off of the vessel from the turning wheel with a wire or a thread while the wheel is rotating or stationary. Here, I consciously use the word wheel-made instead of wheel-thrown. Closer examination of the sherds that exhibit traces of the potter's wheel reveals that the potter's wheel was not used in the rough-out stage of the ceramic repertoire. Instead, the initial hollow form from clay is created by coiling, and the potter's wheel is then used as a shaping technique. Unfortunately, no entire vessels with traces of the wheel were recovered. Based on rim sherds that were at least 5 cm big, a reconstruction could be made of the vessel orifice. There are two differences within the chaîne repertoire of wheel-made ceramics in connection to the vessel shape. The first category are the plates. They show rilling, concentric striations, and drag marks. Coils are between 1.5 and 2 cm in thickness. Thinning operations show thickness discontinuities and dented places on the vessel surface, which are a result of rotative thinning and shaping during the potting. This suggests that the potter's wheel was used for thinning the coils as well as the shaping of the rough-out. The second category is the largest one. The majority of the vessels within this category were of an unrestricted jar with an almost straight wall, with diameters ranging from 12 to 41 cm. But this group also entailed restricted jars with the largest diameter above the half of the vessel and diameters up to 30 cm. The profile of the larger jars, both restricted and unrestricted, suggests a possible association with sugar production, which was introduced to the Caribbean at Concepción de la Vega in 1503. Last, this group also consists of pot lids with diameters between 8 and 12 cm. The ceramics from this group show rilling, concentric as well as arc striations on the base. Coils are between 0.8 and 3.1 cm big. The radial plane of some of the sherds showed S-shaped joining of the coils. The majority, however, had horizontal joining. Coil seams, when present, were not parallel to the rilling. The sherds are finished with fine rilling, and some drag marks show traces of rotational movement. About 50% of the wheel-coiled sherds are decorated. The dominant decoration technique is when a comb-like tool is dragged over the surface of the vessel whilst the clay is still wet. These comb-dragged patterns are often multi-banded with intersecting straight and wavy lines. The most common are patterns on or just under the rim, but they also appear on the inside of an open bowl and along the entire surface of a pot lid. Some of the rims of the larger vessels do not only bear incisions, but are also decorated with a pattern created by finger pinching. Wheel coiling uses the potter wheel to facilitate the joining, thinning, or smoothing of the coiled rough-out. It is proposed that the skill for wheel shaping is less difficult to learn than wheel throwing, as they are an extension of the hand-building techniques, because it does not imply change from the practice, either in technique or in skill. While shaping allows the potter to make a vessel that resembles the wheel-thrown technique visually without spending too much time on learning this technique, which can be a potentially valuable cultural commodity. And wheel shaping allows potters to build vessels up in stages and can thus be adapted in a variety of manufacturing settings and equipment types. I will never be able to pinpoint exactly who made the wheel-made ceramics at Concepción de la Vega and Cotuí. Taking the site's historical context into mind, it could very well be an indigenous potter, a Spanish potter, or a potter from Africa who was either moved from Africa to the Caribbean directly, or who spent some time in Spain, where he or she either where he or she learned the technique prior to being shipped to the colony. Since the vessels are not wheel-thrown, a Spanish potter is less likely. However, a Spanish person who knew the potting technique will likely have been involved in the learning process at one point in time. While the majority of the forms we have identified are Iberian in nature and are related to a long-standing Mediterranean ceramic tradition, the decorative attributes present seem to emerge from a dual parentage. Comb-dragged and wavy line motifs are prevalent in Yoruba ceramics from West Africa since at least the 13th century, and annual wavy bands, in singular or in multiple registers, have a broad application in ceramics associated with cultures throughout West Africa. So, the potter seems to have drawn on Atlantic African aesthetics and decorative traditions, perhaps converging with Mediterranean techniques. This suggests some African heritage within the manufacture of these pots. Although enslaved laborers in the encomienda often lived marginal lives in the colonies, their role in the transculturation process is present. Both enslaved peoples and Spanish colonists have influenced the ceramics presented here. The introduction of the potter's wheel is a Spanish introduction to the New World, while coiling techniques were prominent indigenous and African techniques. The shapes of these vessels are likewise an Iberian influence. The vessels are made with local clays, and the decorative technique has an African origin. Here, I hope to have shown that the introduction of the potter's wheel in the Americas was not a one-to-one transition from Spain. The presence of Spanish vessel shapes made with Spanish, local, and African techniques could reflect the intention of the Spanish to maintain Iberian lifestyle in the colonies. This can also be seen in the appearance of the vessel with the wheel finish. It may have meant that the Spanish-looking vessel was desired. The local and African traditional rough-out techniques suggest that these vessels were perhaps not made by Spanish potters but by laborers within a colonial system, which could reveal some degree of cultural preservation within an enslaved situation at the sites. I thank you for having an interest in this research, and I look forward to your questions and comments.